With Sam and Lindsay, grab a cozy seat where readers and writers finally meet. From wild plot twists to the tales we adore, here's a bookish bonus to explore. Tell me everything.
This is a first collaboration between our podcast, Tell Me Everything, and our book club, the Novel Idea Society. So a combination of Tell Me Everything and the Novel Idea Society. And our first collaboration guest is a first-time author, but you're not new to books because I read all of the things that you have studied in the past. I'm talking about Avery Curran. Welcome, and thanks for making time for us.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So the book we're talking about that just came out, we have a different cover in Canada.
Yes.
It's called Spoiled Milk. And it is like, I want to say almost like a higher class Gossip Girl, but more violent.
Where they
That's the vibe. You grew up in New York though, so you could tell me if it fits the Gossip Girl vibe.
Yeah, I feel like I left New York when I was 9, so it would have been pretty disturbing if I'd managed to get into the kind of Gossip Girl vibe before then. That would be like a pretty hardcore childhood.
And now you're in London?
Yes, yeah, I've been here ever since, so 20 years.
How does one end up in London at 9 years old or 10 years old?
That was my dad's job. He was promised a promotion if we moved here. And then by the time we'd settled in, they were like, "Oh, psych." But by that point, it's such a pain to move across an ocean that we just sort of stayed.
Oh,
And I've been here ever since.
cool. So you have a really interesting background, and it like appealed to me because I have an English lit and religious studies degree. So I've gone down that like epic historical like tomes of books where like sometimes they're awesome and sometimes you're like, did they get paid by the word?
Yeah.
But what you see, I should explain to other people. You have a history background.
Yes.
What kind of history did you focus on specifically? Because history can mean anything.
Yeah. So it's a complicated story. My BA was in history, but my PhD is in technically the English department. It's one of those little quirks of academia where you sort of somehow find yourself in this other world and you're like, well, I've never practical criticismed in my life. I don't know how to read a poem. I don't know what a novel is for, I guess, except for reading them. So it was a kind of slightly winding road where my PhD supervisor is in the English department. So now I am too. And I'm always sort of very awkwardly showing up at these departmental conversations like, oh, don't really have any expertise here. I don't really know how to talk to you guys. But my PhD was in 19th century spiritualism. So seances and mediums. It was a lot of fun, but a very strange thing to have a degree in.
So I know when I did my religious studies degree, I dived deep into cults because I am fascinated by how you get people to believe things that they believe, like whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or you fall into a cult. It's like it's community, but I always wonder what it is about the community that gets you to join one. And your research and your background, it kind of fits into that, like the occult, off into cults, into that, like the thing that fascinates people, but you kind of hope you don't ever end up in, or
Yeah.
in a dangerous kind of way.
So what I would say is that a few of the people I wrote about in my PhD were in cults for sure. Which is to say they were very isolated. They were often isolated from their families for one reason or another, although complicated by the fact that sometimes they're being isolated from their
Yes.
families because their families are quite rigid and they would like to live a sort of freer life. And then they end up in this situation where you're like, is this a freer life? Does this sound kind of terrible? Does this sound like hanging out with your weirdest friends 24/7 with kind of no hope of escape? But I would kind of argue that a lot of the people I was thinking about were not actually in cults.
Okay.
And were involved in what they perceive to be this kind of like amazing new religious movement, but that's actually quite open. Because I feel like to me, like one of the hallmarks of a cult is that you're not meant to talk about it. You're not meant to associate with other people.
It's like Fight Club.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas spiritualists, the thing I
Mhm.
always think about is like they were really obsessed with telling other people about what they were doing.
Mhm.
And you get little pockets where they're a little bit more private, and a little bit more careful about who knows what. But on the whole, as a movement, like one of the things that made my life really easy as a researcher was that they were constantly like writing newspapers and books and like trying to get as many people as possible to read them.
Mhm.
Not necessarily because they wanted sort of to inculcate new members into this like dangerous private society, but because they were like, everybody should believe the stuff that we believe and like we think
Right.
it's amazing. So weirdly, there's a kind of anti-cult ethos in the
Okay.
people I've been thinking about a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, in a way that is also like the word occult comes from the Latin, and I think it's for the word for hidden. Um, and so in a way, like one of the things I was writing about in my doctorate was that they're actually not really that occult. And they become more occult over the course of the 19th century and like
Mhm.
into the 20th century. There's definitely more of an occult, I guess, energy or ethos among these people. But earlier on, they're kind of like they think it's kind of millenarian. They're like, oh, everything's about to change. And like, you know, we're there first, but everybody's going to be with us pretty soon. Like in their minds, they were on the cusp of this like massive social transformation where like everything would be completely different. And to them, this wasn't something that they needed to have like a special code word to like enter the room about. They were like, whether people like it or not, they're going to be part of this as well. So I think it's a really interesting thing where, you know, the cult thing is always so interesting to me because you know, how do you get into that? But weirdly, I find it much easier to imagine getting into spiritualism if I were in, you know, 1850s America or whatever, because they're trying so hard to get you into it.
Can I ask, do you have a belief system? Do you subscribe to a belief system?
I don't. No, my family are all kind of culturally atheist, I guess, but not in like a super committed way, just a sort of kind of lack of belief more than anything else kind of way. People often ask me if I believe in the stuff I researched,
Mhm.
which I always find super interesting because they're quite shy about it. Like
Oh, really?
they don't have
No.
like
Tell me everything. I want to know
yeah.
everything.
Well, exactly. Yeah. In a way, it's sort of easier. Like, no, not sort of tiptoeing around the question. And my answer is always kind of like disappointingly no, but
Really?
I'm open to it. So I have nothing in the way I see the world tells me that this stuff is impossible. Um, but at the same time, to some degree, I can only believe in the things. I mean, you know, I can believe in things in a kind of abstract way, but I can only believe in things in like a real and personal way when I see them.
Like tangible.
Um, yeah, and I think, you know, if there's ghosts and spirits out there, they are not interested in me. They don't want to like I'm so open to it. I would love
You're like, I
to
want
have
a ghost best friend.
exactly. But I've been denied that so far, which is very disappointing for me. So my kind of academic viewpoint has always been I'm writing about these people as if everything they experienced was real. I'm not usually thinking about it from like, oh, somebody's doing like fraud or like
Mhm.
pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, just because I'm thinking about belief systems and
Mhm.
like it's my understanding that the people I'm writing about most of the time believed in the things they were seeing, and that's what matters to me, like regardless of what was actually happening.
Mhm.
But for me, like I don't know, I've never. People are always like, "Oh, have you ever seen a ghost?" And the answer is sadly no. You know, most of the time I hear a creaking noise in my flat and I get really excited and then I look up the cats just walking around and it's like, well, God, there we go. There was a thrilling experience that I'm never gonna have.
Have you do you go back to the States a lot?
Not as much as I should.
Well, no, I
I'm
ask because I ask if you've ever been to Winchester House. Because as we're talking about this and as I was reading this book, I don't want to say bamboozled, but I'm a chicken. Like, I don't want a ghost friend. I have
yeah.
like barriers in my mind that I'm like, I'm not the person you want to talk to. I am terrified of this stuff. It doesn't mean like to a point that I almost do kind of believe in it.
Yeah.
Um, and I really was terrified of going because of all the crazy things that have happened there. But talking about like she had a seance room and she had
Mhm.
all of these beliefs, like she was building these doors and windows for spirits to get to places. And then you open doors and it's a wall and there's windows in the floor. And it's just such a wild place. And it made me think of that as you're talking about this.
Yeah, I've never been. So when I haven't been back since 2017, and I'm actually going in
Oh,
April,
good.
May this year. But the thing about spending time in a place where you have family and like you have stuff that you're supposed to be doing means that I never go anywhere else. Like I have family in Connecticut, and I'm planning to see them, and like I have sort of work obligations in New York that I'm going to do, and that's where I'm from, and I miss it, so I'm planning to go there. It means I don't really get anywhere else. Like there's a time I'd have to take like weeks and weeks off, to go and to traipse around this country, which means like there's loads of my birthplace essentially that I've just never seen and have no idea about whatsoever because, every time I go back, it's like, well, visit the family in this place, visit the family in that place. And they're never tourist destinations.
No.
I mean, I wish they would live in like Niagara Falls or something. I don't know. But it's like Iowa.
Okay. Let's talk about specifically. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but we don't have hours. Let's talk about spoiled milk.
Yes.
Where did the idea come from? Was it a specific character? Was it the death? Was it a boarding school? Like, what was the first idea that led to the kind of overarching plot that turned into this book?
It's funny because, people have been asking me this question as the sort of publicity has been ramping up for the book. And I look back because I wrote the first draft of it in 2022.
Okay.
And I'm like, where did it come from? Maybe this is my supernatural experience. But like, I knew I wanted to write about spiritualism because that's been, my like academic interest for years and years and years. I've been writing about spiritualism in a kind of research capacity since 2017. And so I was like, well, I feel like I want to write like a good book about spiritualism because I think it's quite hard to do. And I knew I wanted it to be queer because that's my life. And like, that's, they say, write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted it to be historical because I really didn't want to contend with the concept of phones.
Yeah.
Which I think
Phones ruin everything in
they ruin
storylines. Like
everything.
the answer is always, you have a phone. You could Google it. You could call someone. So you basically either have to kill the phone or lose the phone, or the phone ruins every good story.
Exactly. And so I was like, once I was like, we got to get the phone out of the way. Then I thought, I'm a historian. Like I've always been interested in like thinking about the past and what the past does to us. And the way that like the way that the past constitutes the way we see the world, and like how we see the world through the lens of our environment, which is often quite different to the present. So like the queer spiritualist historical stuff kind of all came at once. And then for me, I just love boarding school stories like that. I always loved them as a kid. I read, when I was moving here, I wanted to sort of understand where I was going. So I, on purpose, read like loads and loads and loads of mid 20th century boarding school fiction.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, this is going to teach me about my new homeland. And then obviously I was moving in 2006, so it didn't teach me anything about my new homeland, and nobody expected me to wear a pinafore.
Did you
Nobody
go to
was
a
giving
boarding
me
school though?
No. So I went to an all girls school, and
Okay.
that was not heavily informed the book, but no, not a boarding school. Thank God. I think I would have absolutely hated it. But I had this kind of romantic vision of what this life was going to be that was really constituted from Enid Blyton. Mostly Enid Blyton and a few others. I loved the Naughtiest Girl in School books. People keep saying Mallory Towers, but to me, the Naughtiest Girl in School, like those are the real killer ones. They're so good. And that's Enid Blyton, and they're these amazing boarding school books from like the 50s. And so, I love the boarding school setting. I'm really fascinated by these kind of like childlike views of the world that it's like the school is kind of a safe haven, and like it's almost like the world doesn't touch the school, and like the dynamics inside the school are always so kind of fervent because there's so little external input, and like everybody comes into this space with the life they've had beforehand and their circumstances beforehand, and all that's really important. But it's kind of like you put people in this environment and they take all of these contextual factors about themselves and they're like distilled down to the purest versions of themselves in this isolated and really intensive environment. And I think that's just such a rich opportunity for fiction, and especially for horror fiction, where what you want is people as the kind of purest version of themselves in this situation of extremity. They're already in a situation of extremity by the time the story starts. It's just that they don't perceive it as such. But like, it's crazy to be in a boarding school. Like, it's crazy to be in a room with like 6 other people that you've known for years and years and years of your lives, and you barely ever see anybody else. So I was kind of interested in exploring all of that, and it kind of all came to me at the same time, which sort of makes sense because I think all these ideas go so neatly together. that it felt almost inevitable to me.
What made you want to write a fictional novel after years of doing academic research? Because it's a very different style of writing.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I'd always kind of harbored fantasies of writing fiction. And I think I was like one of those kids who was always like, "Oh, I'm reading a book or whatever," and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so cute." And then at a certain point, I think I was like, "It's time to put away such childish things and become serious about the world." And I was like, "There's no, there's people who do this and people who don't do this, and I'm in the category of people who don't do this." And I think I had a lot of like really amazing extremely creative friends when I was a teenager, and I sort of saw them as existing in a sort of different way to the way that I existed. I was like, well, I feel like I don't have this kind of wellspring of creativity that you guys seem to have, and I was very impressed with everything they did, and I sort of felt like it wasn't available to me somehow. But I'd always kind of, harbored the desire. Like I read a lot of fiction, I read pretty widely, and so it was always there with me. I had some like forays into writing short stories during the pandemic, but I think I'm not really a short form person. I like a big long
I'm the
project
same
that I've
way.
kind of
I can't do I don't know
yeah.
what it is. I don't know if I need the character development. I have never ever enjoyed short stories. I would rather read Charles Dickens
Yes.
than short stories. And that's not to say I want to read Charles Dickens either, but I just favor longer stories. There's something about short stories that I'm just not interested.
It's tough. Yeah, and I think the way I always think about it, because I've really enjoyed some short stories in my time, but I think I prefer them to come to me. I tend to enjoy short stories more when like somebody will recommend an individual story or like I come across an individual story. I'm like less keen on collections, unless it's by somebody I know. I love their work, and
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure and then when you have a sense of a writer, I think kind of as a writer, you get something out of a short story collection that I think is quite particular, which is that you're able to see how they apply their skill and their interests in a slightly wider
Mhm.
frame of reference. And I'm thinking like there are some amazing short story collections. Like I'm thinking of Julia Armfield's Salt Slow, which is
Mhm.
incredible. And there's like a real sense that they're so cohesive.
Mhm.
Like they're really thematically engaged
Yeah.
and interesting. But like when I tried to write them myself, I was just like, I just can't do this. Like it was a disaster.
Are you a
And I
short
think
story long person, not a long story short?
yeah, exactly. I really like a shaggy dog story. This is why I have to outline because otherwise I'll just sort of start rambling and I'll never get where I'm going. But yeah, so like one day I was like, oh, listen, my PhD starts in 3 months. I'm gonna have this because a novel and a PhD are like roughly the same
You
length.
wrote
So
this before you wrote your PhD?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, I've been busy.
Apparently.
Um, yeah, so my PhD was 97,000 words, including all the footnotes and all that jazz. But total 97,000 words. And Spoiled Milk, I think the draft ended up being like the one that went to print was like 98. So they're like around the same length, big, hefty Word documents. And I was like, once I've got the PhD started, I'm certainly not gonna, fulfill this childhood dream of finally writing my magnum opus. So I kind of thought to myself, if I don't get it started now, I'm never going to do it. Like the PhD lasts 3 to 4 years in this country. It's like a big, long chunk of time. You're very busy. It's a lot of thinking. So I thought, well, if I just write the first half of this idea, then in the next, 3 months before my PhD starts, then by the time I'm finished with it, I'll be able to come back to something real. Like it's not going to be a sort of half formed idea or like the first chapter of something, and then I'm going to just like put it in the bin and never think about it again. If it's substantial enough, then I'm going to think about it as like a real thing that I should really keep working on. But then I had such a good time that I wrote the whole thing in in that period of time.
I'm always
And so I started.
interested in, like, first-time authors or first-time published authors. I mean, you could be an author and not be published, in theory.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, how did you get your book deal? Because, I mean, you managed to nab a major publisher on your first book, and that
yeah.
is not super common. Sometimes they'll publish indie and then eventually get picked up by a major publisher, but how did you manage to end up with, in Canada, Random House?
Yeah, I was really lucky. So I finished the first draft of Spoiled Milk. I then worked on it over like a year and a half maybe. So I ended up looking for my agent in the beginning of 2024. And that was I was very lucky. That was a very smooth process. A friend of mine referred me to her agent, and we really hit it off, and they liked the book. So that was pretty straightforward. And then we went on submission in March, and it had sold by May. And when it came to Penguin Random House specifically, that was like a really fortuitous situation that I couldn't have foreseen, which is that. So I had the way it worked for me was that I had my primary agent is in the UK, which is where I live. And they had found a sort of secondary agent to find a US publisher, because, she'll have all the connections. And so I have this wonderful secondary agent called Steph Delman, who is fabulous. And she found a US publisher, and pitch the book to them, etc., the way it normally goes. But there are people in the industry who just sort of float around, and they're called scouts. And sorry, this probably explains things you already know, but scouts I don't really understand what they do, but they are extremely important, and they work really hard, and they're very cool. But they're kind of like slightly, there's sort of espionage aspect to it, I think, where they're sort of like, they form the grapevine. They're like sort of whispering in people's ears, "Is this book going around? Have you heard about this?" And to my knowledge, what happened was that this is kind of what happened. And Random House Canada got wind of the book and asked my agent to send it to them. And then they went in, because my US publisher is also it's like under the Penguin Random House umbrella as well. They went in on it together, which makes it all a little bit more straightforward. And it's kind of like a semi-joint, semi-separate situation. So this is why we get the extra Canadian cover, which is wonderful. And I have a separate Canadian editor. But like in a way, we're all kind of working together, which is nice. It's nice to have it be quite cohesive, just to spare me the emails of having like multiple separate deals.
So are you full-time writer now, or is this a side hustle? Because depending on which author I talk to, it is not their primary job.
Yeah, so I'm in a bit of a weird position right now. It is extremely difficult to be a full-time author, which I know because I have a lot of friends who are writers, and very few of them are able to, including people that, I would say an average layperson like might have heard of and would and who's very successful and would think is going to be somebody who has a pretty straightforward path to being full-time as a writer. But it is extremely difficult. The structures of the way publishing works, it's really hard. I kind of am right now, but kind of not really because of intention. But my PhD finished like 3 weeks ago, and that was my job. So I've essentially had a job the entire way through the publication process of this book. So it's certainly a lot of work doing a PhD. So and I had a stipend, and I was being funded. So that has been my job, but that ended a couple weeks ago. So now I am what I sort of describe as like semi-unemployed, which is to say I have the writing job, and I'm contracted through 2028 because I have a second book coming out in 2027. So I'm like partially employed there, and like doing some teaching work at my university. So I'm partially employed there. So it would neither be accurate to say I am a full-time writer, nor would it be accurate to say this is a side hustle. I'm just kind of conceptually hustling right now, trying to find like work to do. So yeah, a complicated answer.
No,
Not
and
one
I know
that
it
I have
is. I think that's
satisfying.
the thing that I find most fascinating about the industry is that there is not one way to do it. Like, there's no clear path for anyone. There's no clear path to getting noticed. Like, an agent helps, but not everyone has an agent. And sometimes you have this crazy following and you only ever digital publish, and it could be your career. So it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting to me how people forge their way through. And some people aren't even interested in it being their full-time job. They just like this like little thing that they do on the side, and they're very happy to tell these little stories or long stories, depending on what they are, and then, have a completely different life. Um, I want to talk about the horror aspect of the book.
Yes.
Are you a horror reader and movie watcher? Or like much like when I read Chuck Palahniuk's books, I sometimes wonder where the ideas come from. And so that is the question in a roundabout way that I'm asking is, where do you get your horror inspiration?
Yeah, a question that deep down is like, what's wrong with me?
No, because the thing is I think some of horror writers, I think, are some of the most fascinating people. You look at Stephen King, right? Like,
Yeah.
prolific writer. I don't think he's a serial killer. I don't think he has
No,
a
no.
desire to be like to hurt people or harm people, but his brain goes into these really interesting places and develops these really interesting stories. So I'm curious where you like my husband often says, my dreams could be books. Sometimes they'll be nightmares and they'll be horror movies. Sometimes they'll be action movies. And he probably could turn them into things if he was a writer or motivated to write. He is none of those things. But I'm curious where yours comes from. If you've always been super into weird things and that's just what you're interested in.
Yeah, like I said, I read really widely. I think that's important because for Spoiled Milk in particular, like there's a big horror element, but I also drew on a lot of different kind of traditions
Mhm.
of literature. So like I was thinking about like Gothic fiction, which I don't think shades into horror. So something like Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, where that's pretty solidly in the Gothic space, but not edging into the horror space.
Mhm.
And I was thinking a lot about like we were talking about like Enid Blyton. But I think I do read a fair amount of horror, but I'm more of a horror film person. Because I try to like, especially because now that I am writing, I try to keep my reading quite Catholic with a small c, because I think it's really useful to like draw on a variety of things. I think that's often what makes something feel quite like fresh.
Yeah.
And it's what makes me feel inspired because if I'm reading people who are functionally doing similar to the thing that I'm doing, I don't want to end up in a space where I'm at a kind of dead end,
Yeah.
where I'm like recycling other people's stuff. Whereas for me, I feel like if I'm looking at a pretty wide variety of material, I'm able to kind of like, the way you metabolize this stuff is
Mhm.
so sort of mysterious. Like it's really hard to produce a kind of clean theory of it. But you're kind of I want to metabolize a lot of different things and into something new. But for me, I find it easier to watch horror films without kind of thinking about how they connect with what I'm working on because it's a different medium,
Oh
and
yeah.
I really feel quite strongly that I don't want to be writing a kind of book which is kind of like a pseudo film, where I want to be like thinking about narration, I want to be thinking about interiority, in a way that I think is exclusive to the written
Mhm.
word in a sense. And because films have such a different kind of language and they operate so differently. So it allows me, like watching horror films allows me to kind of metabolize some aspects of that and then to like bring those out in a new way. So a lot of films that I was thinking about were like Jennifer's Body. That was a big one for me, which is such a great movie, like really underrated when it came out and is like finally getting its dues. What else was it? The Japanese horror film Hauzu from 1977, I want to say. That was really big, like on a sort of aesthetic level. It's like a bunch of schoolgirls who go into this spooky big house and like lots of really crazy stuff happens. I would really recommend that one. That and The Handmaiden, which is not horror but has some horror elements, I would say. There's some like very like I think a lot of suspense in that one, which is the adaptation of the Sarah Waters novel Fingersmith. So yeah, I think like I watch a lot of slasher movies, like 80s, 70s, 80s slasher movies. I love John Carpenter. And certainly I think you can see the slasher influence in Spoiled Milk, which is something I've been thinking about a lot because I don't think it's necessarily something somebody would pick out for themselves having read it. But for me, it was really important.
Mhm.
Like there's like a big, I don't want to do spoilers, but
No,
like
not at all.
there's sort of escalation in the last section of Spoiled Milk that for me is kind of structurally something I took from slashers. Like that's where I got that section of the book. Um, and I was trying to find ways of like making that work in a prose context and like ways to kind of transform that experience for the reader, so that it felt like it was the right medium for what I was doing. So yeah, I think I do read some horror. I really love Paul Tremblay. He's amazing. I love Julia Armfield and that kind of space. Alison Rumfitt, who wrote Tell Me I'm Worthless, which was another that was a really big inspiration for me, which is a really good haunted house story about like English fascism and transness. So I love that book. But yeah, I think in general I want to like cast a wide net and then like see to like really torture the metaphor, cast a wide net and like see what comes into it and like let it sort of sift through until like only the things that I need are left, and then I can kind of use them how I want to, which is a very roundabout way of answering your question.
Is
But yes, I
there
love horror.
is there a lot of horror in the queer fiction space? I haven't read a ton of queer fiction. I've read some. Um, but I'm curious how that might be different from standard, she says in
Mhm.
quotation marks,
Yes.
or like traditional, she uses in quotation marks, like horror and, these kind of like female friendship novels. How
Mhm.
is it? Is it different or is it not different? I'm asking the question, but I don't actually know because I don't actually see a difference. But I'm wondering because you read a lot. You just
Mhm.
referenced that trans story. Um,
Mhm.
is there a difference, or is it just a representation thing? And it's just you're just including another community.
I would say it's much more than just representation. For me, it's like really structural. A lot of the queer, because there is a ton of queer horror, and like that, there, it's like a really thriving and vibrant sort of sector of the industry. It should be more thriving, and if
Mhm.
it were not for the profit motive, I'm sure it would be.
I mean,
Um,
queer romance is having a moment right now because of
yes, yes. Well,
regular
that's
reason.
the profit motive. They've realized, if the right thing hits, you can
Yeah,
really
yeah.
do numbers on that.
You just got to get into the
Um,
horror space. That's next. You just got to pitch a movie
yeah,
or a show.
exactly. Exactly. But yeah, so I think there's like a lot of really amazing queer horror, and like I'm thinking about again Julia Armfield, and like we were talking about Alison Rumfitt, Michaela Clements and Anjuli Datta have an amazing book. They're married, and they have a book called Feast While You Can, which is queer horror. But I think it's in the stuff that I'm really interested in,
Yes.
it's more than just representation. The horror, the queerness and the horror are kind of baked into each other, because I think you get so much mileage out of the sense of being at odds with the world around you, and like the world is built to accommodate you. And that there's other versions of this. So I'm thinking about Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark, which is about blackness, and it like turns the Ku Klux Klan into like a very sort of cosmic horror thing.
I
And
knows.
it's an amazing book. Yeah, I love that book. But yeah, so I think there's like a lot of marginalized, you just like call it like marginalized horror,
Mhm.
which I think really takes the fact that society doesn't want you and turns that into something. And I think it gets it for me, like one of the kind of core fears. Like I think all good horror should be really playing on something that people are genuinely afraid of, and like that really
Yeah.
sort of
No, that
messes with
makes sense.
them.
And I wouldn't see it as different because for me, I've never had that experience, so I wouldn't necessarily
Mm,
identify with it. I mean, I've felt unwelcome in other ways,
mm,
but
mm.
it's not the same when it's fundamentally who you are, whether it's your skin
Yeah.
color or your belief system or your sexual orientation or your gender. Um, I haven't experienced some of that, so it makes sense to me that. But I think it's great though that that exists
Mm.
for different communities for the representation to feel like you are represented in a way that reflects how you feel about yourself and things that you'd be afraid of in a real way, not just like I'm terrified of clowns.
Sure. Yeah.
But like in a real like existential way, the things you're
Yeah.
afraid of versus like tangible things that you're afraid of.
Yeah, and like thinking about, the iconic, the sort of clown horror, which is Stephen King's It, one of my favorite books of all
That's what
time.
ruined clowns for me. I was in second grade. Do
Oh,
not
that's too
recommend
young.
watching it when you're like, in second grade.
No, that's a terrible idea. Yeah, I read it when I was like maybe 14 or 15, and that was early enough. But what that book is so good at is it takes, and in ways that are sometimes more or less clumsy, like it's Stephen King, it's the 80s. There's a lot of cocaine involved, but like in in ways that are more or less clumsy, it looks at the losers club who are in their
Yeah.
own ways experiencing marginalization, and it looks at how that sort of connects to this big horror, this big thing,
Mhm.
and like a lot of it is like very gendered or kind of queer coded. With I'm speaking about like Eddie Kasparik's
Mhm.
narrative, where he's like so frightened of kind of contamination, and all these kids, like the way they live their lives, and the context they bring to their lives is what defines the horror for them. So I think it's such a good example of that. And I think
Yeah.
on a wider scale, this is kind of what's happening in the genre, when we look at the sort of queer aspects of it.
I've never
Um,
thought of it that way, but that is I bet that that exists in more films and books than we realize. Because
well, there's a
I am not someone who looks at movies in any kind of analytical,
Um,
like serious way for the most part. I mean, I know when I should, when there's like, you know, a Jordan Peele movie that comes out. I mean, there's always a commentary of some kind. I think that that's one thing
mhm,
that horror is amazing at, is inadvertently shining a spotlight on something that's not cool, that's like
mhm.
happening on a grander scale. And so those ones I always watch for the message because I know he's very good at baking those into his films. But I don't always like Hereditary ruined me. I will
Yeah.
never watch that movie again. I was not warned that it's something you ease yourself into. And the last scene of the movie is baked into my brain. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it will ever leave. And it was because I was really challenging myself to watch more horror movies because when I lived alone, I was a chicken and I couldn't do it. But as
Mhm,
I, like, fell into a relationship and there were people around, it was like I had a little bit of a safety net. I wasn't alone. And
mhm.
maybe there's some deep therapy thing there about not
Yeah.
experiencing things I'm afraid of by myself. Um, but Hereditary was one of those movies that I was like, "Oh, I get this. Oh, this is scary. Oh." But it's almost like I have to go back and think about it. And so, like, having
Yeah.
this conversation, I'm like, "Ooh, this one, that one, this
Yeah.
one." But, like, that said, last weekend, we took our daughter to Scream 7, and I
Mhm,
love that series. I will
mhm.
watch every movie that Wes Craven is connected to in that Scream series. I don't know why I love it. They're all slasher movies. Like, people they're a little more gory, but I don't know what it is about them, but you're like, it's and maybe it's a nostalgia thing because it goes back to like the early aughts when like I Know What You Did
Mhm,
Last Summer, and there was like a really big teen. They were all adults, but there was like a teen horror boom, and it was like
mhm.
identifiable with my age group. And so every time they bring out something new, I'm like, oh, I remember this, and the characters are all aging with me as well. So that's a thing. I have to ask, what's your favorite horror movie?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Do you have something that popped into your head first, though? There's always
It
a, like, first thing
was
that zings.
yeah, it was Halloween,
Yes,
the first
Michael
one.
Myers, the ultimate villain.
Yeah, I really love that movie, and I read, Carol Clover's book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, which really, like, unlocked it for me, which is, like, a very theoretical piece of nonfiction writing about slasher films, and the way that, like, identification works in a slasher film where, like, it does this, like, amazing trick where you're, like, kind of alternately identifying in a sort of gaze sense with this, like, killer, like, following someone around, like, carrying a knife, and
Mhm.
then you're sort of pushed into identifying suddenly with the final girl, and there's, like, a it's, like, a really interesting book, and, you know, I loved Halloween when I first saw it, obviously, like, that score is so amazing, and it looks incredible, but yeah, I think that book really, like, unlocked it for me and then made me think differently about how like, what horror can do, and, like, what the genre is capable of. Because I think it has so much potential, and I think that's potential that's not always taken up on, but sometimes it is, and sometimes it is whether or not the creator knows it is, which I always find very interesting. I'm very interested in these, like, accidental things, like,
Yeah.
the second Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Have you seen that one?
I can't do Freddy Krueger.
Okay, interesting. Well, the second one is
I don't know
fascinating.
why. I didn't watch them when I was younger, and now they don't really they look like they were filmed on a potato for me. I can't get into the, like, and then it's the claws, it's the, like, and it's the singing kids. If there is one thing that automatically nopes me in a movie where I'm like, "Nope, nope, nope." It's a singing or an evil kid. It's
Uh-huh.
those little voices that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
"Ugh." And so for me, it's that 1, 2, you know, the song and the kids, and no, I've never done it. I've never done the
Interesting.
Jason series either, but Halloween, I've seen them all, and like Scream, I will continue to see them even though the last couple haven't been as good.
Not a deal.
But I'll still go because 'cause I'm just like,
Mhm.
"What is this person who never dies gonna get up to next?"
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, so I have to say I'm a big, Nightmare on Elm Street fan. Like, I'm not a completionist. I've only watched, I think, like, 3 of them.
Mhm.
Um, but the second one is, like, the queerest film that, like, exists. It's
Really?
astonishing, and everyone who was involved in making it, has, like, really complicated feelings about that, and there's a documentary so if you don't wanna watch the film, I would say watch the
Well, now I
documentary
kinda wanna watch
Scream
the
Queen.
movie and watch a documentary about it just to learn
Yeah.
about it because I didn't know that.
It's fascinating. The documentary is amazing. It's about the star of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, who was he's a gay man, and it like ruined his career. It became like a total running joke.
No way.
And it was allegedly not the intention when this film was being made, but the finished product is like astonishing. It's like you would just like this sort of like really obvious subtext, but like in combination with these like really wacky special effects, it produces like a really amazing effect. And I think, yeah, that kind of sense of what horror can do, whether intentional or not, really interested me. Because what I found during the process of like publicizing this book is that people read things into it that I didn't intend
Because
to
you
be
bring your own
there.
experience to it.
Exactly, and like the things that scare them, you know. And like someone I was talking to was saying how like, you know, the seances really really scared them, not necessarily for the reasons that I intended them to be scary, but because they're like really specifically afraid of like possession and like not being in control of their own bodies. So yeah, that was something that I was like fascinated by, because like I meant for like a little bit of that to be there, but they took it in these sort of like thematic directions that I never expected. And I'm so interested in kind of what people who make things don't see that they've put in there, and kind of what that says about like the world we live in and like the way we think. You know, it was really interesting. Yeah. And like supported views, like they were able to be like, oh, I can like point to this part of the text where like it seems really clear. And I was like, damn, it does seem really clear. I never would have thought. But yeah, so that's been really interesting.
Have you seen Sinners?
Yeah, like a
Okay.
great film. Yeah.
So as we're talking, it's Oscar weekend. Nothing's been handed out yet, but I saw Michael B. Jordan won that award for Best Actor for it. That movie was wild to me because it didn't feel like a horror movie until it felt like a horror movie, and then it felt like a ride you couldn't get off of.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what you thought of it as someone who reads and writes and consumes horror in this moment that this movie, because horror doesn't typically get, I mean, Jordan Peele does in a way, but horror doesn't typically get this stage. And for the actor to be a Black man who like is a leading character through the entire movie, he's not killed off in the first scene, which is like a terrible trope that existed. Like it was a joke for a reason. You know, the Black guy always gets killed in the first like couple of scenes, but it's such an incredible movie. I can't believe he plays two people, but I'm curious, like, what did you think of it?
I really liked it. I always really something I always really enjoy is the sense that you're in a piece of art where the genre can kind of switch up on you, and that always really fascinates me as a reader or a viewer, but also as a writer. Because yeah, that sense you had, I think, is really true. That like it feels quite like grounded and realist for a good portion of it. It feels kind of like a sort of like a social drama in a way, and like a sort
Yeah.
of relationship drama. And then it takes this turn and it becomes kind of speculative and fantastical, and then it takes this horror turn. And I think that's all really beautifully done. And I think playing with audience expectations is such an interesting thing to be able to do. And it's something that I was trying to do a bit with Spoiled Milk, where, you know, if the characters feel, or like Emily, the protagonist, feels like she's in a genre that she isn't in. And she feels like she's in a murder mystery. She's like, I just have to figure this out. Like I have
Yes.
to gather all the clues, and I have to like marshal my theories and find my suspect, and then everything is going to be fine, because that's how a murder mystery works. If you can solve the case, then it's fine, and then like everything goes back to normal, or like some degree
There's
of
some
normal. But
conclusion. There's some acceptable ending.
yeah, exactly. Whereas in the horror genre, there's a lot more room. Like you don't have to have the ending of the book be that you figure out what happens. You don't have to have the ending be this kind of neat thing and a return to normality. And I really, the thing I had kind of had the most fun with in a way with Spoiled Milk was finding that moment where she sort of is able to like realize that she's not in this neat world with a sort of tidy ending. That doesn't really exist for her. Because to me, like, you know, that feeling of kind of narrative safety almost is so powerful. And it's like like really baked into the way we view media, is that if we know what genre it is, we feel like we understand
We
what
know what we've
are
signed
the
up for.
exactly what we've signed up for, like what the possibilities are. And it's always so powerful, I think, to have that kind of rug pulled out from under you. So I thought that was something that Sinners did really, really well. I thought that was like extremely interesting and well executed. Yeah. Yeah.
As you talk about Spoiled Milk and those expectations, do you have a favorite scene that you're like, oh, I nailed that? That's my favorite. I love like maybe you get the best reactions from it. Like, is there a scene that you're just like, oh, that's my favorite?
Oh, it's hard to say. I feel like I think about it on like less of a like scene to scene level. I feel like for me, it's kind of like well, maybe the easiest answer is the first seance where Violet appears, because I felt like I just had such a strong grasp on her character and her relationships with the people in the room.
Mhm.
That I was like, it was really interesting because like sometimes writing feels very easy and sometimes it feels very difficult, which is a very obvious thing to say. But like that was a moment where it sort of felt like I had produced everything that I needed to do in advance and I could just kind of go. And like I was like, I know these characters so well that
Mhm.
I know how this shakes out and like what happens. I have an outline. Like I'm a very aggressive outliner because I like it's so easy to sort of lose your path. But like outside of the outline, I kind of was often like, oh, seance where Violet shows up and she says some stuff, and like that's what I had to work with. And
Trusted
sometimes
your
you go into
background
that.
knowledge that you could just let it rip.
Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes you go into a scene where you're like, that's what you've given yourself, and you're like, God, I should have said something more substantive or helpful. And like I have to like go into
What
this
did
kind
I
of
mean by this note?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So it was really nice to be like, no, I know exactly what I need to do, and like I'll like have somebody say something, and the thing that somebody else says next just feels totally inevitable to me. So that was like a real pleasure, and I felt like that was a moment where I really got to like play with these characters that I knew I was so familiar with. Um, yeah, the one I guess the most reactions I think is the sort of just like the first chapter, where to me, because I remember writing it and it was the first thing I wrote, I was like trying to do this really awful conceit where I was like, it's gonna be like a Greek chorus. And it's gonna be in like the first person plural. And I was like really doing all this stuff. And it was like way too much. And so the first draft of the first chapter was like all in the first person plural. So it was like
Mm.
we did this and like we did this. And some of that remains because like part of the point of that chapter is that it's like very collective experience, like they're all doing it together.
Mhm.
Um, and they're kind of a unit at this point in a way that becomes fractured as the story goes on,
As they do.
or more as they do. Yeah, it all becomes more complicated. But like in that opening scene, there are as much as there ever going to be again a kind of clear unit in a sense. But yeah, so in my mind, I look back at that first chapter and feel nothing but like abject horror, where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Why was I trying to do that? And like, it's so funny that like years have passed. Like I
Mhm.
wrote that first scene in 2022. It's 2026. Like, it's been nearly 4 years since I wrote that scene, and it's changed a lot, and, like,
But it
people really
still
like
gives
that
you
opening.
the feels.
Yeah, exactly, it's horrendous, so to me, like, I think people really like that first chapter, and that's so nice, and it's your opening into the book, so that's good, but, like, for me, I feel nothing but, like, horrendous embarrassment when I think about it. So, yeah, for me, the scene that I liked best was Violet's first seance.
Did it end the way you intended it to, or did the ending change as you wrote?
Um, there were character changes along the way, but it ended the way I intended.
Okay.
So, again, I'm gonna do this without spoilers as much as I can. Evelyn was meant to die very early on, like before the halfway point.
Mhm.
And then I was suddenly like, oh my God, she's the perfect foil. Like I have to keep her. I can't get rid of her. She's everything. Um, and so I shook that up. But the broad strokes of the ending, it was always that. It was always like that. And to me, like, it's funny because I think a lot of people have said to me they didn't see it coming or like they didn't see where things were going. And I was like, that's so weird. Because to me, it was like
Very clear.
the only available ending. And like, things along the way might have shifted and altered, but to me, that was the only available ending for me. And I couldn't see it happening any other way. So yeah, it's one of those interesting things that I'm learning about kind of the difference between writing and reading, I guess, which I've always thought were kind of like maybe more linked than they actually are or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had authors tell me before that you write the book, you release the book, and it's no longer yours. Like,
Yes.
the words are yours, but the interpretation of it, the way people react to it, like, everything you intended it to be no longer belongs to you, and you kind of just have to ride the wave of how your readers interpret it.
Yeah, and I've read Roland Barthes, like the author is dead, and I think I actively want people, and like we were talking about earlier, I've really valued learning about other people's interpretations of
Yeah.
something that I wrote that I felt like I had a handle on. What always does feel really funny to me is when people like I don't I it doesn't I don't object to it, but I just find it really interesting. Like people have asked me like, oh, what did this mean? And I'm like, I don't know. Like,
It's a
it's
novel.
yours now.
It's not a
I
research
can't
project.
I can't tell you. Like, it's really funny, and it's not like a. I think it sometimes sounds like I'm being really obstinate or like
You're
deliberately
like, "It's not that
unhelpful.
deep." Like, they
It's
really
like,
want this
or
deep
like sometimes it
explanation.
is. Like sometimes it is that deep, but it's not deep in a way that I can explain to you in a way that I think is going to be satisfying to you. I can tell what I was feeling. I
Ah,
could tell
okay.
you what I was thinking, but in terms of what the book is, that actually isn't up to me in a
Mhm.
very real sense. Like like you said, like the words are mine, but like the text is in a very real way not mine anymore. And sometimes people will be like, was this thing this? And they'll like list some stuff, and I'm like, I did put all of that in there on purpose, and that's kind of all I can tell you. Like, the interpretation is ultimately yours. And like, if that's what you got from it, that chimes with stuff that I was doing that was
Yes.
intentional. But beyond that, like, I can't like give you a word of God answer. I think that maybe doesn't exist for me.
Okay, I wanna ask you about your next book, but
Yes.
first, what's the best book you've read lately?
Oh, I like 2 days ago finished reading John Knowles's A Separate Piece, which is a book from the 1950s
Yeah,
about
I feel like I read that
boys.
in high school.
Many, many, many people did, and let me tell you, read it again, it's crazy.
As an adult, it's a totally different experience.
Completely different. So I am on the record, I've always said this, I hate when schools make you read books intended for adults about teenagers. It is a terrible idea every single time because, like, Spoiled Milk is a book about teenagers, and it is not a book for teenagers. I think some teenagers could read and enjoy it and get stuff out of it, but that's not the same. Like, it's not aimed at a teenage audience. And I think that, to me, that's really important because I'm saying something retrospective about like my own teenage years in a way.
Mhm.
Like, I'm interpreting my teenagehood, but the way I was thinking about it when I was a teenager was radically different. And my teen self would be really pissed off to think that this is how I was interpreting like my thoughts and feelings and actions.
Right.
And to me, like, that gulf is huge. So like, my version of this, because I went to school in this country and in the UK. So my version of this is a book called The Go Between, which is like the British A Separate Piece in a way. Which is about a 12-year-old boy who like just like ruins his life over one hot summer. And it's a great book. I love it. Reread it a couple years ago. Phenomenal. I hated it when I had to read it at school because I was like,
Uh,
well, this is all stupid. This is just stupid. He's making such dumb decisions.
yeah.
Why would he do? I wouldn't do any of this. And like, of course, I was making bad decisions of my own variety. But I was like,
Uh,
I can look at this 12-year-old boy in this book and be like, he's such an idiot. Like, I would never do that. And I was doing really stupid stuff of my own. And I think it's as an adult that you are able to like approach things with that kind of distance and
yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
So I would say, yeah, A Separate Piece is like like staggering. It's like a huge achievement. It's like, and talk about books that have a subtextual life and like that are completely informed by what reads to me as a very queer sensibility, but which is like quite opaque in some ways, and I think would have been quite opaque to me until I was maybe like 15 or 16 myself. But yeah, amazing boarding school book about like the like violences that people do to each other and like the ways we kind of enact violence on each other in various ways. Really phenomenal. The sentences are gorgeous. It just like blew me away.
Okay, next book. Can you tell me about it, or is it like what can you tell me about it? Because I often ask these questions, so like, actually, I can't say anything. But what can you tell me about it?
Well, you're in luck because it was announced just about a week ago.
Oh, great timing.
Yeah. So yeah, officially, I actually can. If this had been like a little while ago, I would not have been able to tell you very much. But I can tell you, in fact, it's called Mortal Passions. It is I've got like a good long string of nouns and adjectives that have been very useful to me in the past few weeks. And I'm trying to get them into the right order in my head. It's a lesbian gothic campus romance satire horror.
Wow,
Um, yes, it's a lot of things in one.
that's a lot of things.
It's more cohesive than it sounds. It's about a
And what
graduate
sounds
student.
doable? Like I feel like every horror movie has some kind of romance in it. So you're
Yeah,
checking both. You can
exactly.
check those boxes quite easily.
Exactly. So it's about a graduate student at a prestigious but financially distressed university who falls in love with the crisis PR manager the institution has brought in to kind of manage its own decline.
Oh,
But this person just so happens to be a vampire, which is
as you do.
the cause of many terrible, terrible problems that happen over the course of the book. So yeah, my hope was for it to be a kind of it's like very sincerely romantic, but also definitely in the kind of gothic horror space. It's like set in the modern day. It's about kind of like moral compromises and like the things we allow ourselves to do because they're pleasurable or desirable,
Mhm.
if they're not things that we think are good necessarily. And yeah, it's got a vampire that I had like an unbelievable amount of fun writing. I think they're hopefully a good time. But yeah, it's kind of I was like joking to my agent. I was like, it's Elif Bachman's The Idiot meets Interview with a Vampire. It's Carmilla meets A Compass Error, which is like a 1950s book that nobody but me and like three other people have read. It's like
It's giving me
Salem's Lot
True
meets
Blood vibes.
it. I would say it's like it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more playing with seriousness. I don't want to say it's more serious than True Blood, but it's like
Well, True Blood is
it's like
not
in a
serious at all, so being serious
yeah.
about
Well, I mean more like it's more it is more serious than True Blood, but you know, and I say this as a with great fondness towards True Blood, which I have enjoyed very much in my life. But I don't want to be like, oh, it's like really serious and po-faced, because I think my hope is that it's like quite funny and romantic and
Mhm.
scary, but it's kind of it's like playing with some ideas, like it's kind of like riffing on campus novels,
Okay.
riffing on like some of these ideas about the academic environment. Uh, is kind of my response to like dark academia as a
Mhm.
thing, which is to say, it's like having been an academic, the things about academia that are dark are often not the things that dark academia in fiction are thinking about. So it's kind of like, which is not to say that they're not good or fun. I've enjoyed a lot of that stuff, but like this is kind of my like, what if dark academia was like about the things that I find the darkest, which is to say, like the marketization of higher education and like university restructuring.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's hopefully a good time. It's coming out. I think the date hasn't been officially set, but it's like spring summer next year.
So you've got like another year till that one comes out. It's done? Like, are you done your edits and it's submitted?
The book is finished. It's fully written, but I'm working on edits now.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm busy.
So what are you most looking forward to going ahead? I know you talked like, are you going on a trip? Do you have like lots of PR for this book? Like what's next for Avery? Aside from getting into your into your house, which you're currently locked out of.
I am, yes, yes. Yeah, I think we didn't mention that at the beginning of this. I'm in my stairwell right now because I left my keys inside my own flat and my girlfriend is out at the moment. And I was like texting her, like, when are you going to get home? Can you like let me in? And the answer was no, she was not getting home in time. So what's next is going inside,
Mhm,
feeding my cat, who I have periodically heard screaming behind me.
mhm.
But yeah, so yeah, going to the US at the end of April, beginning of May. I'm doing a couple of events there, which I think will be really nice. Doing an event in New York. Um, I'm looking forward to that very much. I'm looking forward to getting these edits in. It's been like let me tell you, it's really weird working on your next book while
Promoting
doing
your old
publicity.
yeah.
Yeah. It's really, and especially because I wrote the first draft of Spoiled Milk such a long time ago. I'm like, who is she? And I'm like it's nice. It's been nice to do the promotion because I'm kind of getting back into that mindset. Like, I'll be like, oh, that was quite good. It was quite good, which is a nice way to feel. I often find it really difficult to kind of look at my own work with anything but like a deeply shameful eye.
You've had enough
But
space
yeah,
between when it was finished and when it came out that you're like, "Oh, I can actually appreciate this and not cringe every time I see someone holding it."
and to be clear, I do that a little bit, just like a little bit. Um,
As someone
but
who, like, worked in television and radio, anytime I saw someone watching and or looking at something that referenced me, I would hide.
yeah.
So, I didn't get into the journalism world for the attention. I mean, I love asking
Mhm.
questions and having the ability to do things like this, but, like, I don't need to be splashed all over things, so I can appreciate the thing about your books is that nobody knows who you are unless they flip it over, and even
Mhm. And then
then,
my face is on there, but
there isn't on this one.
oh no, not on the back. Oh no, of course, right? Yeah, because the
Canadian one,
Canadians
no,
are.
and it's not even in the about the author at the back.
Oh, there you go.
So
Well,
you're
I'm in that
a
case.
little anonymous in Canada, so you
That's
can
quite
just, like, creep
nice.
on people picking up your book, and they would never know it's you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because yeah, in the UK edition, which I have a bunch of in my house, there's like a big picture of me on the inside flap, and I'm suddenly like, oh my god, there she is.
Well, thank you so much for making time for me and doing this despite being locked out of your house. I wish you
Thank you for bearing with
absolute
me.
success. I know the book just came out. Like we're still early days.
Yes. Is
But
that on
it's
Tuesday?
a super fun, I almost called it a romp, and it's not that. But it's a super fun way to look at a boarding school horror female romance novel. And I think people are really going to enjoy it. And I hope that you watch some more great horror films and read some more wonderful books. And we'll keep tabs on you, and we'll see when this next one comes out. Maybe we'll touch base, and you'll be back in your flat by then.
Ideally, yes, although knowing me, it's entirely plausible that I will somehow be locked out again, but be doing it like from the roof or something. I don't know.
But I
Who knows?
mean,
We're
you
all
could
being a new
write an
year.
entire book about that. I'm sure that's a great fear for other people too.
Definitely that really atavistic sense of like, I want to go to my house. Yes, exactly. Well, thank you. This
Thank
was
you
such a
so much,
pleasure.
Avery. I appreciate it.